I'm Kendra with team number 3, and for our presentation, we'll be doing Muncie Community Schools. The mission of Muncie Community Schools is to provide a quality educational environment that allows every student to maximize his or her potential and upon graduation, possess the skills necessary to be a positive, productive, contributing member of society. There are many different objectives that are specific to each different sector, and some of these sectors are finance, facilities, strategic plan teams, goals and objectives, student services and sport and safety, human resources and professional development, and communications and family engagement. An example of an objective from the finance sector, the goal would be to develop a comprehensive budget that creates positive cash flows for the district and builds adequate cash reserves. The objectives to achieve this goal are first, to build a public trust through communications of the district resources, and second, to explore and maximize all financial resources possible. Muncie Community Schools is located 50 miles northeast from Indianapolis. It has 70,085 residents, and Muncie is composed of 84% white, 11% African American, 1.2 Asian, and 2.3 Latino. Since the Indiana Department of Education began tracking this data in 2006, Muncie Community Schools has seen a steady decline in the number of enrolled students. The current enrollment of 5,603 is down 1,254 students since 2006, which is an 18% decline. Muncie's current unemployment rate is 3.8%, which is above Indiana's average of 3.2%, but still lower than the national rate of 4.2%. Muncie's median household income was $41,041, which is $11,273 lower than the Indiana median household income and $16,576 less than the U.S. median household income. As of 2016, Muncie Community Schools was the third largest employer in the city. A political issue concerning Muncie Community Schools is that Indiana did not put enough money aside for the school. State education officials are expecting a shortfall in school funding this year that could be as high as $9 million of underestimated student enrollment. Creating opportunities across income, racial, and ethnic groups is still important. For Indiana, this is still an issue. The white graduation is 89%, the Asian Pacific Islander 89%, Hispanic is 80%, and African American is only 73%. A higher importance is being placed on schools to reduce their carbon footprint, including eliminating waste from lunches, reducing paper consumption. One thing helping reduce paper waste is the use of student computers. 80% of Indiana school districts now have initiatives aimed at providing a computing device for each student, with more than half of those providing a device for each K-12 student. With this new technology comes a need for cybersecurity, and this will require ongoing investment on all levels. Most money for funding comes from the state and local government. The sources of most states are sales and income tax, corporate and personal, but on a local level, these funds usually come from property taxes, which are set by the school board and local officials or citizens. Private schools get money in many different ways, from tax exemptions to grants. Factors that drive growth in the United States education market are increasing per capita disposable income, rising mergers and acquisition activities, and increasing labor force participation of women, and rising children population under the age of 5. Current market trends are switching to an online education program, personal funding as a major source of the funding, increasing investment in education, greater use of technology in education, increasing international demand for the U.S. education, growing importance of early education, rising education funding levels, and increasing demand for skilled labor. The growth of the market is being hindered by free public K-12 initiative, labor shortage, increased competition from foreign universities, and legal and regulatory issues for post-secondary schools in the U.S. Competitors for the school system are other close districts, online schools, and private schools. In Muncie, there are 5 private schools. The private schools have a ratio of 17-1. Online schools typically have a ratio of 1-on-1, and Muncie Community Schools has a ratio of 19-1. Private schools are often associated with more fees than just attending a public school. Switching to a separate district than which you live will undoubtedly take more time and expenses just looking at the travel costs associated. The cost of online school is a big answer that varies from free to expensive. The answer is it depends on what school you choose. Some schools are even accepted and paid for by the state that you are in. The threat of new entry is moderate. The biggest threat would be online schools. Online virtual education is growing by leaps and bounds and keeps on gaining momentum. With the quality of online virtual schools, private school programs improving to standards that are far better than brick and mortar schools.
Hi everyone, my name is Jalna Panikkar and I'm going to discuss about the organization evaluation, some major issues and plans of implementation for Muncie Community School. Let's start with the organization evaluation. Muncie Community School consists of 6,628 students, 366 teachers and 212 other administrative and supporting staff. The Distress Unit Appeal Board has voted to put Muncie Community School in full state control since they were unable to reduce the debt deficit. The financial situation of Muncie Community School is said to be in debt of $37.7 million by the end of 2019. And Muncie Community School will definitely need a significant restructuring in the organization to reduce some cost and improve efficiency. Even the consolidation of Muncie Southside School into the new Central High did not help the financial situation. Let's start with the major issues that Muncie Community School is facing. The property tax circuit lawbreaker, MCS, has lost over $14.2 million in the last 4 years due to this law. This law actually caps the property taxes on homestead property across the state at 1%. Due to this law, Muncie Community School is the most affected school system since they lose close to 44 cents every dollar which is due as property tax. This forces the school to get their operational costs from other resources like referendums and other local government organizations. Muncie Community School has not only lost $14.2 million in property tax circuit lawbreaker, but also has lost $29.3 million across in other funds. The State Department has asked Muncie Community School to develop a deficit reduction plan in conjunction with an outside agency. Now this slide shows a chart which shows the comparison between the loss that the other schools and Muncie Community School faces due to that property tax circuit breaker. Here you can see that Yorktown loses close to $14 every dollar which is due as tax, and Muncie loses close to $44. Now some plans for improvement. What Muncie Community School can do is collaborate with Ball State and Ivy Tech to consider ways to create efficiencies. They can begin to start selling off surplus properties or acquire new renters. They should also review staffing options, including potential privatization of custodial and lunch services and more efficient use of educators in high-need environment. This will definitely save the district $2 million annually. They should also think about reducing additional support staff positions, particularly in lower populated schools.
The Muncie Community Schools have seen immense financial issues as cutting classroom programs has failed to adequately address their deficit. The state's takeover clearly signals that the community schools must dramatically change their organization if they want to remain financially viable. A bold school board initiative seeks to reduce their annual costs from $46 million to $34 million. These efforts will also extend beyond administrative cuts to include maintenance and repairs. When evaluating areas that need improvement, the Muncie School Board has decided to analyze which situation is in more need than the other and prioritize those improvements. These issues affect the entire community, as citizens worry that the school board will eventually close their doors based on not being able to pay their bills. On a brighter note, the Administrator Assistance founder stated that the community schools do still have a consistent inflow of cash. However, their outflows need to be reduced in order to remain solvent. Based on this situation, parents of children in the school boards would need to decide which schools are best financially, educationally, and physically when they decide where to send their children. For instance, schools that have minor issues are not going to see any improvements until Muncie is able to improve their financial debt. These current financial situations have also impacted teachers. Muncie Community Schools has cut numerous staff positions through retirements, resignations, and layoffs. These cuts were implemented because of the property tax caps and the new school funding formula, which cost the school board roughly $29 million. The school board is looking into reducing class sizes and to continue the reduction of staff. They also are looking into cutting certain programs such as phys ed and art in order to continue this staff reduction. Changing the way education is defined is the result of what happens when you cut programs like this. These changes are no longer best for what benefits the children and how they are learning, but mainly focus on what's best for Muncie's community schools in order to get back on their feet. Changing the curriculum by reducing staff sends a message that certain programs of education are unimportant. However, with stringent state requirements, difficult decisions are necessary. With issues of low enrollment, these planned changes are likely going to encourage continued reductions in Muncie Community Schools enrollments in the near future. Based on this situation, Muncie Community Schools has voted to close down 3 elementary schools permanently. Deficits are projected to be reduced by $18 million through these school closures. These 3 schools were specifically targeted because they had low capacities of only 40 to 60% and or relatively high maintenance costs. One strategy our group presented to fix MCS's financial issues is to continue to find ways to cut expenditures through staff reduction, school closings, and debt reduction. The option is in many ways a continuation of the changes that they have already implemented up until this point. There is no reason to believe that the state or local governments will give MCS more money, so this option provides them with an opportunity to adjust expenditures given the new, lower levels of revenue that they accrue. Though staff reductions are not ideal for the employer or the employee, they can still invest time and energy into developing staff and faculty to be well equipped enough to engage with students and help them achieve their academic success they expect. With MCS investing time and money into their staff, these actions show the rest of the Muncie community and the state of Indiana that they do care about their students and intend to provide quality education experiences despite the cost-cutting measures. Successful teachers and faculty will raise the demand of the MCS enrollment, help the MCS schools reach their capacities, and even encourage higher enrollment in challenging programs. This will result in more revenues and possibly even positive cash flows. A second alternative strategy would be for Ball State to assume control over MCS. Ball State possesses robust resources and networks to alleviate MCS's short-term financial issues and lay the groundwork for long-term sustainable financial support. From a short-term perspective, Ball State can lead the process of appointing a school board, overseeing system-wide audit, and implementing cost savings initiatives such as layoffs. The long-term support would include procuring outside grants and investments to supplement the tax effects that, for example, have just affected MCS's resources and revenue. Outside support enables MCS to be independent of political negotiations, cuts, and budgeting. In other words, the cash flow would be relatively stable and MCS would not be tied to the decisions of the elected officials. With this stability, they can pay off their outstanding financial debt and create new budgeting plans, and possibly even attain a goal of reserving cash and creating positive cash inflows.
Criteria that Muncie Community Schools will use to determine which alternative is best for their future include looking at cost savings projected over the next 3 to 5 years, which option could potentially give them better cost savings. Also looking at future projections of revenue generation and stabilization of expenses. Potential effects on the quality of education and employees as far as decisions made, including any potentials for staff reduction, and staff perception of fair and equitable implementation. So the graph on top actually shows projections comparing the two alternatives. The alternative A would be that Muncie Community Schools continues along its current path of working with the state to restructure and reorganize, and the orange bars indicate cash balance projections if Ball State takes over. Down below, this graph is very important because it does show that over the future, Muncie Community Schools is going to have to make some tough decisions as far as how it is going to finance its future. State and federal revenues continue to decline. As far as at the state level, monies going towards education continue to decline, so school systems are being forced to find money on their own in order to operate and remain solvent. So let's evaluate the two alternatives. If Muncie Community Schools continues under state management until it becomes solvent, requiring a minimum of 2 years of emergency management, they would pursue a 9% reduction in expenditures with seniority and need-based staff reductions. Now, this is imperative with either alternative that they address 74% of their expenses, which comes from salaries and benefits. Under this plan, they would simply reduce based on where they saw need being the highest, maintaining those employees, but also looking at seniority. Under this plan, they would also look to close 3 elementary schools, and the 3 schools that would be closed are basically those who have low enrollment of 40 to 60%. This would save them $6.3 million in utility and yearly expenditures, not to mention potential monies that would come in from the sale of these properties. They would also pursue a debt restructuring with yearly bond revenue generation of approximately $2.8 million, assuming that the state allows them to restructure their debt. This would leave them with a projected cash balance at the end of 2020 of $4.45 million, which is still better than the negative cash balances they've held over the past few years, but may not be enough for them to continue to work to aggressively pay off their debt. The major disadvantage of this plan is that they remain under state control, which means they have an emergency manager who basically they are beholden to. So there's a large potential for their proposal to be denied. For instance, in the past year, they've had multiple denials. Most notably, the superintendent's salary was threatened to not be renewed at the end of the 2018 school year because of their deficits. And with the state, they basically are denying any contracts that are over $30,000. So they would continue to be under stringent management, at least for the foreseeable future with this alternative. Now, if Ball State assumes control, we would still see very similar 9% staff reduction, still maintain at least the 3 school closures and the debt restructuring plan. But then Ball State's president would appoint an independent school board. And this school board would further look at different ways of improving cash flows and reducing the deficit. So one advantage of this plan is that further staff reductions made would fall under a comprehensive performance evaluation that the Muncie Community Schools School Board would enact. They would also seek external grants and donations with the assistance of Ball State. This has already been successful. In the past 6 months, the president of Ball State has been able to secure $2.9 million in external aid, basically from private donors, families, and also from local banks and organizations. So with this model, there's a projected cash balance at the end of 2020 of $7.74 million. And the major difference, the $3 million difference, is coming from the fact that they are aggressively seeking external funding that they would not be doing under the initial alternative. And so, one of the major advantages, or there are several advantages, would be the expanded partnership with Ball State. Ball State would be committed to helping the Muncie Community Schools with grant writing. They would continue to expand dual credit courses for high school students, which would further strengthen their educational system. They would have the advantage of philanthropy that's already established through Ball State, and they could look at further innovations in their curriculum along with Ball State.
Our recommendation is to implement the option in which Ball State University assumes management of the Muncie Community Schools. Given the severity of the financial problems outlined earlier, a strong intervention is required to get the Muncie school system back on track. Ball State has the resources to not only get the Muncie school system out of debt in the short term, but it can also help the school system develop a long-term financial model that will sustain it for years to come, while maintaining the top educational credentials that the Muncie school system is known for. To implement this plan, Ball State should start by selecting a school board for the Muncie school system. Across the country, school board members are typically either elected or they're selected through an application process. Given the large task at hand, turning around the financial state of the Muncie school system, we believe that in this case, Ball State should select board members. In the future, elections will probably make sense, but for right now, they should select members of the community who are familiar with the problems and who are able to tackle issues like debt reduction, staffing reductions, etc. Once the board is selected, they should start by tackling the financial problems plaguing the school system. They should work with outside consultants to identify educational grant opportunities that would help get some money and cash flow into the school system immediately. With those consultants, the board would lead the grant application process. Additionally, the board and the outside consultants should leverage Ball State investors. Those Ball State investors have already shown a desire to support educational initiatives, so they are a great audience to go for in terms of trying to get money into Ball State now and to build a future sustainable model. Simultaneously, the board should also work with an outside consultant on evaluating all aspects of the Muncie school system. As we've discussed, staffing turnover and layoffs are inevitable because the school system needs to save some money. So to do that, the board should lead a robust analysis of all positions in the school system. They can identify redundancies and then decide whether they want to do involuntary terminations or offer a buyout plan. With the remaining staff members, the board wants to create a cohesive, motivated culture. They can do this by establishing mentorship programs, professional development opportunities, and building a robust pipeline of candidates for future job opportunities. I'm sorry my baby is not a fan of this plan, but our group thinks it's a great idea and it will really help the school system turn around quickly.